Hey y'all, Alec back here with Hive Fitness and the Legends We Are podcast. Today I got my boy Craig with us, and he's going to be talking a little bit about his bodybuilding journey. You know, what he learned on his first show, and ultimately what led him to wanting to not continue with it and kind of transition back to powerlifting. And there's a lot of good content. We're going over mental health. This is going to be probably a 2 to 3 part episode. We're going to split everything up into some segments that are nice and short, easy to consume. So make sure y'all stay tuned. We got some really important content that we want to hit on, and hope y'all enjoy. See ya. Yeah. So I know last time we talked about like you were leading into the bodybuilding show. So now we're what, a couple months out of it. At
Yeah,
this
it was
point.
July, so
So
July like 17th or something like that. Now we're almost at Christmas, so it's been a long way.
So we're like 6 months out. So yeah, let's talk about it. Let's talk a little bit about like the transition that you started making and when you started noticing like that mentality change. As like your mental health, and also like when you started noticing like at what point the kind of hormones were starting to change in your body as well going through there.
Yeah. So like right after the show happened, and this happens to pretty much I think anybody who would do any sort of competition, whether it's bodybuilding or powerlifting or anything fitness related. For so long, you're training and prepping for that one thing. Like if you're truly going for it, so like you have this high after it, where you're like, well, next time I'm gonna do even better. And so I think I took like 5 days off from the gym, and I had been going hard for probably 6, 7 months straight. Um, I took like 5 days off, kind of let my body resettle because I wanted to eat more food. I had been pretty much starvation mode for like a month. Um, and I reached out to the guy that was coaching me and was like, all right, not going to do a show probably till the next one next year, same time around July. So go into like off season. Don't really want to get past 230 because that's usually about the range that I should be at. Like that's the most comfortable for me. Once I start getting past 230, 235, it's just not comfortable. I'm not really putting on muscle. I'm just gaining excess fat. So we laid out my diet plan. We changed my macros, and I followed that for a good while. Like I'd say probably a month straight. I was still doing the same exact, which I still do now, and I'll get into that. But it was like I was tracking every single meal. Wasn't even really having cheats, even though my calories went up by like 500 calories. My carbs were increased a lot, and so I was still on like that, riding that high, like I'm training super hard. And then I think where it changed for me was right around the Olympia. Uh, George Peterson died, and then not too long after the Olympia, Sean Roden died. And I kind of looked at bodybuilding as a whole and was realizing one thing I had already realized beforehand was I just did the sport for fun because I don't see myself being competitive because I know what it takes to be competitive, and I'm not willing to do that. And so I was just looking at it like, do I really want to keep doing this? This sport becomes hard to defend because this year alone we lost so many people in the bodybuilding industry way too early, heart attacks, and just like off the top of my head, there's 5 that I can think of
Yeah,
that
right.
died within like a few months. Like John Meadows passed away. There was 2 females that passed away. One was a former Miss Olympia. Then you had George and Sean, pretty much back to back, passed away. Um, and
I mean, and those are people
that made
like
me,
those are people that we know like because they're high names. We don't even know
yeah,
the people that are kind of like in your situation that are just getting into
yeah,
it, and people that are like in more entry level that are having like more permanent health effects because they're diving straight into the deep end,
yeah,
without
yeah.
even taking like stock like you did,
They
like.
they probably don't have like a coach that knows like what they need to be taking or what dosages they need to take, yada yada yada. So they're just
Yeah.
an average Joe that wants to bodybuild, and they heard, hey, I'm supposed to take gear. They take it, and the next thing you know, they have an attack. Um, but that was the transition from like hardcore training, dieting. Never like I hung out with some friends like a few times, and even then I took all my food with me. Couldn't eat anything they had. And I think I looked back on that and it was just like, that's what it took to get to where I was at. do I really want to keep doing that?
Yeah.
Because it started to get to the point where the gym wasn't fun anymore. I was just going, I felt like a robot. And it's like, okay, if you're a pro bodybuilder, that's what you do for a living. You don't have an actual job. You wake up and everything you do is bodybuilding. That's how you live. You chose that. You have to. And I get that, but that's not what I wanted at that point anymore. And I think like I started looking back over the prep, and I was like the last few weeks just before the show when I was like really pulling everything in, like my mental state dropped a ton because you're looking at yourself going, okay, I'm not ready. You're picking out every single flaw that you have in your body. And you're like, well, I only have 3 weeks left to improve upon this. And you're not eating a lot. You're pulling off water. You're pulling off the last bit of fat that you need to pull off. And so like every little thing, like if it was something bad, it could just send you into a different mindset because all you're focused on is eating and going to the gym. And so you could have something happen in your personal life, and normally it may not affect you that bad. And it would just affect me way more drastically than it would have. Like it would just have me so upset. It would have me in this poor state of mind or stressed me out. And I look back on it and I'm like, well, that was part of the dieting and everything. It just had me in this little bubble, and anything that impacted the bubble sent me into like a panic basically. And then I look back at the photos and I'm like, I've never looked like that in my life. I looked good. I could have looked better. And then you see guys come off a show and they're showing how they're posing, and it's like, well, that guy still looks really good, but I know he's on a cycle. I'm not. And I look at myself when I'm posing and I'm like, what's happening to me? I was like 212 for the show. I had like good lines in my legs. Now I look at myself, I'm 232, and I'm just like this big block. And if you don't prepare yourself for that, your mentality can just kind of drain yourself because you're looking at the drastic change in your body. And I think you set your own standard to look a certain way. And when you don't, it really impacts you because like that's where body dysmorphia really comes into play. And you kind of have to fight against yourself on a daily basis. Like, this is what's normal. You're not supposed to stay lean year round like that. You're not supposed to stay small. And especially if you're built like you and I.
Yeah.
Like you and I have always been big. Some people are just born that they're born to be that way. Like our normal weight is like the 240 range. That's just eating regularly, and we walk around at 235, 240.
Yeah.
Then we start pushing the envelope and we get to 250. We get to weights that guys couldn't even think about getting to in 3 or 4 years. We do it in 6, 7 months because that's just how we're built. And so that's when I made the transition back to powerlifting because it made the gym a little more fun again. It
Yeah.
let me have more peace of mind with my diet and not worrying about like how it looked, like if my shoulders were still round, if the veins in my legs were still showing. You know, it helped me get out of that mental rut because it was to the point where I just didn't want to do anything anymore. I didn't want to diet. I didn't want to eat. I didn't want to go to the gym because it was like, what am I pushing for? You know, to be in a poor hormone imbalance and mental state. So
No, yeah, I'm excited. I like that a lot because I think, like you said, it seems like there's almost a lack of realistic expectation of what the normal person is going to see after a bodybuilding show. Because, like you said, we see all these pros and then these, high level amateurs that are pushing the envelope of about to become pro.
yeah,
So, like Anthony Montello, Brandon Harding, like those kind of guys that are not quite pros, but you know they're going to be pros like within a year or two,
they're
right?
on their way. Yeah,
And in a way you can consider them pros because of how they look, because they're making money as an athlete online. So I mean, it kind of depends on what your definition of a pro is, right? I know that, like the official pro standing within the bodybuilding card, but like technically I would consider them a pro because they're an athlete. They're a physique figure online that they're making a lot of money from because of their physique. So there's going
yeah,
to be a lot of incentive to continue to look like that even outside of a show. And I think that's one of the things that, like, because I've never done bodybuilding, I've never dove into it, and that's one of the things I didn't really realize until I started learning more about it. When you started talking to me more about it, because you see how they look, and these guys, they get a little bigger. Their face might get fatter again, and their stomach they might lose their abs, but like their arms and their legs are still like really striated with their delts and everything like that.
Yeah.
Um, but I do agree with you. I think that there's just a lack of like people being straight up and honest and saying, and if they're smart, they definitely should be going on like a cruise immediately following the show to allow their hormones and everything to replenish. But even that, all those things that have those half lives is that when you're looking at that, it's just like the realistic expectations that we think that we're going to see as a natural or amateur athlete or just even as a hobbyist, we start to not see. And that's like the really hard part is like, I mean, because honestly, like you didn't know what you were going to look like because you had never been there before, and you didn't know what you were going to look like afterwards, really, because again, you had never been there before, so you don't know how your body's going to rebound. And so,
And you look in the mirror, and it's like, well, 3 months ago, I had like a no waistline, and I was like, vascularity was showing, and now I'm just real husky. And it takes a toll on you, but I think it's because people don't prepare themselves for that. They expect themselves to be like what they see on social media.
okay,
These guys that are taking cycles year round but aren't saying that they are. And so they're like, oh, this was my off season and this is how I looked, and they still look like they could step on a stage. And it's like that's not the truth. That's not what happens to a natural athlete. So
yeah, and even a lot of like actual bodybuilders, that's not really normal for them either. Those are the people that are saying like, this is how I look year round. A lot of those people are social media people that are stocking up on photos when they're in shape, and then they're posting them throughout the year because
yeah,
it's it's not something where you like stay like you really just it's there's a very small percentage of the population that can do that, and even that like can do that while kind of actually maintaining some kind of sanity, like just
yeah,
because of how their body's wired.
yeah,
But for the most part, and once you start kind of like learning about it, you realize that they're just stocking up through photos throughout the year, where they might have like a really strong 6 months, and then those you're not always seeing what they look like year round, and even though
yeah,
they're
yeah,
lying to you. And so yeah, definitely, just like I am glad that there's more transparency now,
yeah, yeah.
about it, and it does help. But it's just it is one of those things where it kind of really messes up the mental health.